Hello. So far in our dashboard in a day project, we have connected to the data, we've done some operations to it in Power Query, and we've loaded it into the data model. So now we're ready to start actually looking at the data model with the Power Query window closed just through the main Power BI window, and to start making some visualizations. So I'm assuming that your file is in the state that we left it at the end of the last video. If you want to start from there rather than having to make your own file from scratch, I put a link to download the file with the data already in it under this video. So let's take a look then at the main Power BI window, because we haven't looked at it very much yet. To start with, on the left hand side there are three different views. Let's start at the bottom in Model View. In Model View we can see the four different tables that are in our data model, same as in the data pane on the right, and between two pairs of them we can see there are relationships. If I hover over the relationship between all sales and product, you can see that it lights up the product ID on both sides, showing that it's a relationship between the product ID in both of those sales. If I double click on the line, it opens the properties of the relationship. It shows me that it's a many to one relationship. It says that the cross filter direction is single and that the relationship is active. So what does it mean by many to one? On the relationship line, I've got a star marked at one end and a 1 at the other end of the line. So the star represents the many end of the relationship, the 1 represents the one end of the relationship, and what that's saying then is that the products, in terms of the product ID that it's linked to in the product table, are unique. Each one of those product IDs just occurs once. So I can use the product IDs in the product table to look up the properties of those products, the manufacturer, the price, the segment, those things. In a typical data model, you would expect all of the tables to be linked up to the rest of the model. But one peculiar thing with our model is that the geography table is floating on its own. It's not linked to anything else. And we're going to see that that causes some problems later. So now let's take a look at Table View, which until very recently was called Data View. They've just renamed it. And we can use Table View to take a look at a preview of the data from each of the four tables. Bottom left hand corner you can see we have a status bar that tells us we've got about 3 million rows of sales data. We've got about 177,000 rows of geography information, and in the geography information each row here is supposed to represent a different small location at the level of zip code. Manufacturer table just shows us 14 different manufacturers, and the product table shows us 2,400 or so different products that we are selling. If we come up to the top view, report view, this is where we will be spending a lot of our time. This is where we create the report pages with the different visualizations in. So for example, over on the right, these are buttons to create different types of visualization. If I click on this one for a clustered column chart, that gives me a placeholder for a clustered column chart. And when it's selected, I get a field well with different boxes here into which I can drag and drop the fields that I want to use for making my visual, just like making a pivot table in Excel. If I right click in the data pane, say expand all, that shows me all the different fields that I have available. So for example, I could drag revenue into the y-axis box to get me bars of a certain height, and then I could put, say, the date hierarchy into the x-axis box, and that gives me a hierarchical structure which I can drill up and down through using my special hierarchy buttons in the viz. So when we have hierarchical data, we get these special buttons for drilling in and out. So I can go to the top level of my hierarchy to see the individual years, and I can press the forked button to see combinations of years and quarters, years, quarters and months, and then right down to the level of the individual days. Good, so that's how I make my visuals, and we'll do a bit more work on that a little bit later. We could start by making a visual that would be useful to us by taking, say, the revenue. So let's start again with a clustered column chart and drop the revenue into the y-axis. And notice that when I hover over it, it tells me that the sum of the revenue for all 3 years worth of data for the entire data set is about 1.17 billion. And my locale here is the UK. That's why you're seeing a pound sign at the front of it. If you're in the US, you should see a dollar sign. If you're in the EU, then I expect your machine is set to euros. So if we try and break this down now by country, now of course I've got 2 different country fields. One is in the all sales table, the other is in the geography table. If I use the one from the geography table, that might make more sense to use the descriptions of the locations in the geography table, because we've got all the different levels of detail there. So let's put the country from the geography table into the x-axis box, drag it into there, and something peculiar happens. If I hover over the Australia bar now, it tells me that the height of the Australia bar is exactly the same as it was before I tried to break it down by country. So something funny is happening. If we look at the data model, what I've asked it to do is to find all the rows in the geography table for Australia and then match them with the rows in the all sales table for Australia, and then to add up the revenue in those rows. So it's not managing to link them up. And of course it's not. We don't have any relationship between the geography table and the rest of the model. So there's no way at the moment in which it can work out how to pair up the rows for Australia in the geography table with the rows for Australia in the all sales table. We don't want to link the countries directly because that's not going to be at a granular enough level. It might make much more sense to link the 2 tables using the zip codes. So let's try doing that now. Let's make a relationship between the zip code in all sales and the zip code in geography. And to do that, we just drag and drop. So I've selected zip in all sales, drag and drop that onto zip in geography. But now it gives us a warning. It says this relationship has cardinality many to many. This should only be used if it's expected that neither column contains unique values. So let's just cancel out of that and think about it for a moment. What kind of relationship would we expect this to be? I think we would expect it to be many to one, because the zip codes in the geography table should really be unique. We want the rows in the geography table to be unique. Each row in the geography table should represent a different small location at the level of a zip code. So there's something a bit odd if it thinks that the zip codes are not unique. Can we check that? We can if we go to Power Query. So let's go to the Home tab and reopen the Power Query window. Click on Transform Data and then select the geography table. And now if we go to the View tab, make sure we've got our column profile turned on, select the zip code. We should be able to count the number of occurrences of each value in there using the column profile. But currently it's only using the top 1,000 rows in our data set, and we've got 200,000 or so in that data set. So what I need to do is go to the button at the bottom of the screen that says column profiling based on top 1,000 rows, to click it and change it to column profiling based on entire data set. So we just wait for it to churn through all the records, and now the two numbers that it shows under the header, the number of distinct and number of unique values, are not the same, and they should be if this is a proper unique identifier for the table. If we have a look at this top record that it's showing here, so the zip code 74850, it tells us that occurs 3 times, which is very peculiar. So can we actually locate those 3 different records? Let's go to the filtering button for the zip code, text filters, equals, and then we'll type in that zip code into the box, 74850, 74850, and press OK. And now it shows us it's actually found 3 different records with that same zip code. And the problem is they're in different countries. So we can see the same zip code is reused in different countries, and obviously those 3 records in the dataset represent completely different places. So the zip codes alone are not unique. What we're going to need to do to link up our geography table with the all sales table is to combine the zip code and the country, and then they should be unique. Right, so let's remove that filtering, close and load Power Query, and then we're going to need to make a new formula in the geography table for a new column that combines the zip code and the country. And we can just concatenate them together. Then we need to do the same thing in the all sales table, concatenating the zip code and the country, and then we should be able to make a relationship between those 2 combined fields. Right, so let's come to report view, where we can see our visual that's not working properly. And first of all, we'll make a new column in the geography table. So this is going to be a calculation called a calculated column. And the way you make a calculated column is to select the table you want to put it in. So I've just selected the name of the table. I think I might deselect the visual actually by clicking on the background in report view, and then again select the geography table. And when I select the geography table, I get my context sensitive table tools tab appearing. Now I can click on new column to make my formula. So it's giving me a formula bar, and I'm going to call it zip country. So I just type zip country equals, and I just want to take the zip code from the geography table, maybe put some separator between the zip code and the country to make it easier to read, and then add the country afterwards. So I'll start typing zip, and then it brings up a tooltip showing me that's the zip code that comes from the geography table. That's the one I want. It's selected, so press tab to enter it into the formula bar. Now a bit of white space to make it easier to read, space, the ampersand concatenation operator. Then I'm going to put a little separator. So in double quotes I'm going to put space, comma, space, then another ampersand, and then I want a reference to the country that comes from the geography table. So start typing country, and there it is, geography country. Press tab to put it into the formula bar. Now I press enter to complete my formula. Now we can see it's added a new column in the geography table with a special icon next to it showing that that is a calculated column. We can actually see the values it's made. If we go to table view, you can see the zip code followed by a comma and a space, and then the country. Strictly speaking, we don't really need the comma and the space. We could have just stuck the zip code and the name of the country together with no separator at all, but it just makes it slightly easier to read when we do it that way. So now we need to do the same thing in the all sales table. We need to make a concatenated new field with zip code and country, but remember the zip code and the country in this case have to come from the all sales table. So I select the all sales table, click on new column to start my calculated column, And again, call this the same thing. Zip country equals. Now I want a reference to the zip code that comes from the all sales table. So start typing zip and it picks up the right one. Ampersand in double quotes, comma, space, another ampersand. Remember, you do have to type these things exactly the same. If I put just comma in one place and comma space in the other place in the other table, then they won't match. So the separators have got to be identical. And then I want country, this time from the all sales table. So select that, press tab, press enter. Now we've got our new column in the all sales table. Let's just check that the values look correct. So in all sales, here we go, they look fine. So now if I go back to model view and then expand my tables a little bit so I can see the new fields that we've just made, we can see them at the bottom. We've got zip country in both of those tables. So now I should be able to make a relationship between one and the other. So I'm going to drag and drop zip country from all sales to zip country in geography, and this time it doesn't complain. So it gives me a many-to-one relationship, and that shows me that the zip country field that we made in geography now is unique. So that's a unique identifier. Right, so if we go back to report view, what are we going to see? How do you think our clustered column chart is going to look now? So now it can work out which rows in the geography table that say Australia should be combined with the rows in the all sales table for Australia. And it should be able to work out all the rows in the all sales table and add up the revenue just for the Australia ones, giving me a much smaller number. Good, so that's the end of this part of the exercise. In the next exercise, we're just going to continue working with the data model a little bit more, make some more formulas, and that's going to be in the next video. So hope to see you in that one.